Decarbonisation in trading and shipping. With international shipping estimated to represent about 3% of global emissions, this is a subject which is vitally important for everyone around the world. Hi, I'm Richard Watts, founder of HR Maritime. Welcome back to Commodity Brief. In this episode, we're going to continue looking at the fundamentals of commodity trading, and we're going to be focusing on decarbonisation. Now, decarbonisation is a very, very important subject at the moment, and it is a subject which a lot of trading and shipping firms are looking into. Essentially, the idea of becoming net zero or carbon neutral. And so this is either by purchasing carbon credits to offset the emissions that are produced, or by eliminating those emissions altogether. And this is an area where we are hearing an awful lot of noise in the market at the moment. A lot of companies are taking action right now, and they are looking at 2030 and 2050 as their sites or their deadlines in place. Now, what we're doing in this episode, I basically brought together a number of different articles, different news sites, to give you a little bit of an idea where we stand at the moment. And in future episodes, I'm going to be diving into some of the different areas, and so looking at some of the new upcoming fuels, looking at some of the methods of propulsion, and also looking at some of the renewables that are being traded by trading companies, and also looking at what some of these oil companies are actually going to be doing when they move away from oil. So in terms of the industry itself, basically we can look at it on two sides. First of all, we have the trading, and then we have the shipping. So starting off with trading, I've broken it down into the energy and agri and metals area. So if we look first of all at the energy side, we have Shell. Their mission, their ambition is to be net zero of emissions by 2050 or sooner. Shell, one of the largest oil producing companies in the world, has made this as their goal. And so you see, this is a very, very important area for them, and it is something they're going to have to work very, very hard to achieve. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see how this is achieved in the long run. We also have articles like this from Trafigura. Trafigura, about a couple of weeks ago, so in September 2020, they released a white paper where basically they said that they think that the global shipping markets should be subject to a tax on fuel, which would then be used to offset a lot of the effects of these emissions and basically provide the right incentives to use new forms of fuels. These incentives which are not really there economically at the moment. And the fact that Trafigura is one of the biggest oil trading companies in the world is coming out and saying this is a big shift. This is a very important moment. Otherwise, if we move on, we have an article, in fact, an interview from one of the founders of Mercuria. This was just a couple of weeks ago, and said that they are going to be investing $1.5 billion in projects which are basically looking to reduce carbon emissions to go into renewables. So again, this is a big shift, and we're seeing this across the industry. So that's basically looking at the energy side of things. If we move on to looking at the agri side of business. Now, the agri side of business is dominated by, I'd say, about 4, 5, 6 key players. You have the ABCD of the world of agricultural trading, and you also have Glencore and you have COFCO. So first of all, ADM, their website, first thing it says is they are setting 2035 emissions reduction targets. They are going for this as well. This is something you see across the board. Bunge, their environmental goals to try and reduce the consumption of water, reduce waste, reduce emissions, and reduce energy consumption. We also see Cargill as well are very focused on this as well, and this is a big part of their business. They're saying they would like to reduce a lot of their emissions by 2050, and they're also focusing on what they can do with shipping companies that they deal with to try and reduce these. And also we have Louis Dreyfus again. They recently took out a line of credit, and this line of credit, interestingly enough, the rates of return, so the interest rate are going to be connected to the level of emissions which are produced through the trade that is being financed by these lines of credit. And so we're seeing this more and more. So yes, obviously it's very important for these trading companies to be doing their part within the global environment, but they're also subject to pressures. They're subject to external pressures from financing and also from investors, those companies which are public as well. Glencore, for example, says that their carbon emissions are going to fall extensively. Now, this is partly because they're putting in place a lot of different measures to reduce it, but also because there is going to be a huge reduction in coal consumption over the coming years. We're looking by 2030 of Europe basically being coal-free. All the coal-using power stations are meant to be shut down by 2030, and this will have a large impact on companies like Glencore. They're going to have to move into different areas of the trade, and they have proved over the years that they're very, very good at doing that and reacting to these market pressures. Now, moving on to the shipping side. So shipping, as I said, is reported to be responsible for 3% of global emissions, carbon dioxide emissions. And you can argue over the exact figure that is correct, but either way, it is a very large percentage and it is a very large quantity on an absolute value. So we see the shipping companies right now making huge efforts. We see MSC is talking about looking into alternative fuels, and that's something that we're going to see going forward. It's on the trading side, how can we reduce the consumption? But on the shipping side, what are the alternatives? There was just a conference in Geneva a couple of weeks ago, the Maritime Transport Efficiency Conference, which was looking at these exact things, looking at how do we reduce the emissions, how do we make the transportation more efficient. And so we're seeing companies looking at different forms of fuel. MSC looking at hydrogen to power their vessels. Hydrogen is very, very nice. I mean, basically hydrogen, when you are using it as a fuel, your byproduct, your waste product is water. So it couldn't be cleaner than that. We also see a number of the other large shipping lines who are basically developing other types of fuel. CMA CGM have just taken on delivery of the largest LNG powered container ship in the world. And so this is going to make a big impact. Now for LNG, this is a big future because this has much less emissions and we can basically, it works very, very similar to the way that the global infrastructure for fuel oil works at the moment. It doesn't require a dramatic change. But that being said, to put in place the supply around the world will require quite a lot of infrastructure. Otherwise, we're seeing companies like MSC looking into hydrogen and biofuels. Biofuels, this is also an area we're going to see an awful lot of effort put into and massive expansion going forward. There are other solutions being put in place which are different forms of propulsion. And so things like wind power. Now, this is an area that needs a little bit more research, but we can see huge savings. It will require new designs of vessels, maybe smaller vessels, maybe more streamlined vessels, but certainly the benefits are undeniable. And also we have the IMO, the International Maritime Organization, is trying to lead the charge in these efforts on the shipping side. They're trying to bring everyone together to do it at the same time. Now, what we do see at the moment is that there is a consensus that we need to have a level playing field. Basically, we need regulations. It's very unlikely that individual companies, out of their particular concern for the environment, are going to take the steps that are required because economically it is not viable. But if there are the right regulations put in place, the right financial incentives put in place, then everybody's on the same playing field, and then everybody will make the steps that they need in order to reduce the emissions, which has to be done now. So that brings us to the end of this episode of Commodity Brief. We're going to have other episodes looking at different aspects of decarbonisation. And so I hope you've enjoyed this episode and click back for future episodes to come. Thank you.